Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. Rainbow Haven Beach in Cow Bay, east of the city, is a popular destination for people all over Halifax in the summer months. There's no transit service to the area, so to get there you need a car, or a bike and a bit of a sensitive adventure. In today's video, I'll be heading from downtown Halifax to Rainbow Haven Beach. As always, I'll be playing a game of +1 - 2 along the way. Every time I run into something that makes my trip safer and more convenient, I'll add a point, and every time I run into something that makes it less safe or less convenient, I'll take away 2 points. You can keep track of how I think the ride is going by looking at the heads-up display in the bottom right-hand corner. Leaving the multi-use path and merging into traffic on Spring Garden Road is pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, this section doesn't have any bike infrastructure. This is the lower Water Street protected bike lane. I'm only going to be on it for about a block, so I'll be pretty quick. It separates me from traffic, and for this section it even manages to be completely grade separated from the road. It's a relatively new installation, and there's no motor vehicle traffic on it, so the paving remains perfectly smooth. There can be an issue with pedestrians walking the lane, but there's none today, so I won't take any points off. This is the Halifax Ferry Terminal. If you're wondering, yes, you can take your bike on the ferries. The ferry can cross the harbor in about 15 minutes. There are some racks in place for you to secure your bike. Your bike does have to be secured in them, and even e-bikes and fat tire bikes can make the trip. Also, the ferry is just nice to use. Okay, we've arrived at Dartmouth, and I'm just going to make my way off the ferry. This is the outside of the Alderney Landing Ferry Terminal. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic, so just reduce your speed as appropriate. This is the Dartmouth Harbour Walk, and it acts as a multi-use path. It's going to get me most of the way through Dartmouth. The trail is well paved. The only thing I'll point out is that for this section there is a cut pole that's sticking out of the ground, hidden by the grass. Don't roll over it because you might end up falling off your bike. This section in particular is way too narrow for the number of users. It's pretty much always like this. The trail actually continues along what looks like a sidewalk, but there's enough pedestrians that I'm just going to cut through this parking lot instead. This intersection isn't a cross ride, so theoretically you have to dismount to use it. That sucks. Bridge! But also, the trail starts to become protected by bollards, so there won't be any cars on it. The point of these chicanes is allegedly that it forces you to dismount and look both ways before crossing the rail crossing. And, like, in theory, I get it, but honestly, these feel malicious. There's other ways of doing that that don't require you to dismount multiple times and move across, so yeah, that's a -2 for me. Normally I refrain from docking points multiple times for the same basic thing, but I'm going to make an exception. These are terrible. Like, we shouldn't have barriers to using our active transportation pathways. The city bought and blocked off this small parking lot next to the apartment building just to make the trail more continuous. That's nice. I was on the fence for taking away points for the giant sinkhole on the trail, but it's only about 2.5 weeks after the flooding, so I'm going to call it a wash. The trail has guardrails, so you don't have to worry about falling down the hill. And of course, the trail is pretty gorgeous and has probably some of the best views of downtown Halifax in the city. The trail has really high levels of connectivity, so you can get to 2 separate ferry terminals, a hospital, downtown Dartmouth, a bunch of apartment buildings and residential neighborhoods, and a community college just by linking up with this trail, and they all go basically to the front door of all these places. The trail isn't totally flat, but it's close enough. You're not going to have any problems with it. This is the Woodside Ferry Terminal, so that's the end of the trail, and I'm just going to apply my usual distance bonus of 1 point per kilometer the amount of traffic. And actually, now that I think of it, the ferry should also have its own distance bonus, which is just 1 kilometer. This is Pleasant Street. It's a 4-lane arterial that's going to be the bane of my existence for the next little bit. There is theoretically an alternate way to get to Rainbow Haven Beach, but it was washed out in the recent floods, so this is my only option, which I guess is a roundabout way of saying -2 for being dumped on a major road. So this isn't a very pleasant road to bike on, and I think there's a few ways to deal with that. The first and best in my opinion is just not to be here if you can help it. If there's an alternate path, take that. Sometimes obviously you don't have a choice. So another approach is actually to just get off the road if you don't feel safe. That can take the form of being on the sidewalk. Yes, that is illegal. Here that's a little difficult because actually the sidewalk doesn't carry on both sides and it switches sides as to which one it's on, so that's not an ideal way of dealing with that here. And the last one is actually just to ride center lane, which is called taking the lane. That works well with good drivers because they will give you the space. Bad drivers may become annoyed and actually more erratic and dangerous to be around, so I think that one's a bit of a mixed bag. Okay, that's about enough adventure for one day. So there's a total of 4 close passes, so that's -2 each, and I was on a busy road. I have a usual distance bonus that I give positive points for. This is the first time that I've had a long stretch on a busy road, so I guess I should have an equivalent for that. So it's -2 per kilometer, which is about 3 since I left the trail, or -6. It wasn't all bad. A lot of drivers did fully move off into the other lane, or at least made enough space in the lane that we were sharing that I was not uncomfortable to share the space with them. The paving was good, and that trip was mostly flat. This is the Shearwater Flyer, and it's going to act as a traffic-separated multi-use path. The entire trail is packed gravel rather than paved, and that's usually used as a compromise between walkers, runners, and cyclists because they can all use it pretty effectively. It varies a little bit, but I do think at some points the flyer is kind of more on the narrow side, and if you run into almost anyone there, you do have to kind of negotiate how to pass each other. All the points where the trail intersects with roads are covered by either a bollard or a gate. Bridge, but also the trail is basically perfectly flat the entire way. I think this crossing should probably be facilitated, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, so I'm not taking any points off. Bridge. 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 The trail has rest stops just like the Channel Lakes Trail and the BLT. It looks like about half the trail was washed out in the floods in July, and I wasn't going to take points off, but it's not marked or flagged in any way, and that's actually kind of dangerous, so -2. This is the northern trailhead for the Shearwater Flyer. There's a facilitated crossing over to the Salt Marsh Trail, which can lead you all the way up to Lawrencetown. Probably the only big downside left to mention about the Shearwater Flyer is that there's no winter maintenance, so whenever there's a winter storm, it is functionally closed down. And just adding in the usual distance bonus for 8 kilometers. Okay, so this is BSAT Road, and I'm on kind of final approach to the beach. This is, I think, a minor collector, so it should be a little quieter than Pleasant Street, but it's still a major road. As I'm approaching the end of the road, I'd say it's flat and well paved, and overall the drivers have been really great. There haven't really been any close calls or close passes, so bonus points for good driving. It is, however, about 2.5 kilometers, so I do have to deduct my usual -2 per kilometer on a major road, so that's -4. And as I'm on final approach, you might be wondering if there's somewhere to lock up my bike, and yes, kind of. There is a bike rack, but it won't fit a lot of more modern designs, especially longer cargo bikes. So that's a negative, but they did let me store it in a locked room, which is really nice of them. I don't know how well that's going to generalize for a lot of cyclists. And if nothing else, I guess there's a juice stand here. The trip from downtown to Rainbow Haven Beach covered about 20 kilometers and took just over an hour, including the time spent waiting for and crossing on the ferry. Most of the trip is very bikeable, but the large section along Pleasant Street was a bit of a nightmare. BSAT Road would probably work for confident riders, but less experienced cyclists would probably still find it a bit intimidating. There's another, less stressful way to get to Rainbow Haven, but it was washed out in some recent flooding, so I'll have to cover it another time. This route was definitely not relaxing, and I probably wouldn't do it too often. Anyways, that's it for this week. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.